Anoushka Shankar, wonderful to see you. And most important question, you've got to start with this in the middle of a pandemic. Are your boys all right? Your mom, your extended family, are you safe and healthy during this COVID-19 crisis?
Thank you for asking. We are all fine. Everyone in my immediate family has been healthy and we're okay. So, counting our blessings there.
Well, this is amazing. A song which you did speak to me a little bit about, but you didn't go into the details. And you said, when the release happens, it will happen. I've just seen the wonderful video to it. It's Those Words, featuring Shilpa Rao on vocals. I understand it all began with a friend of yours, a collaborator who's also a cello player. Would you take me through the story of Those Words?
So, Ayana Witter Johnson, as you say, she's an amazing cellist, but also a composer. And she had worked with me many years ago when I did my album Traces of You. She was a little earlier on in her career and she was part of my band. So she was singing and playing cello in my band. And now she's more of a solo artist, but we have a friendship from before. And soon after my breakup, I guess she, like many other women, was sort of reaching out to see if I was okay. And so she did something very unusual and quite lovely, where she just said, "Do you want me to come over? I'll bring some food to cook for you, and I'll bring my cello in case you feel like playing some music." And it was such a lovely form of reaching out from a woman, a musician, a friend, that she could come in all those capacities. So she came over with an uncooked fish and all the ingredients she needed, and she cooked me this incredible Jamaican fish meal. And then we went downstairs to my studio and just started working on an idea. She actually came with an initial idea of her cello line. So it was really lovely. And then we developed it together. I wrote the sitar line. And then as the EP Love Letters overall developed, I then felt I really wanted to include this piece that we had written, but all of the pieces on Love Letters were songs with vocals. So then I thought, okay, I want a voice. And what would be really lovely, since it's cello focused, is to do something slightly more unexpected and not have English vocals and to have like a really beautiful Indian singer to be on it. So that's when we reached out to Shilpa, and yeah, and that's where the song then developed into what it is that you hear.
Well, the media is going overboard with the Jamaican Indian connection because there's a lady who's running for vice president who's half Jamaican, half Indian, and
Yes.
here you, an Indian, collaborating with a Jamaican. So that immediately makes headlines. So that's quite interesting. Shilpa is also an interesting person more than just a vocalist because she basically belongs from the south, but she's lived north of the Vindhyas and in the west, and the lyrics are actually Punjabi lyrics.
Yes.
So I want you to talk about that aspect.
So it's all over the place. That was actually Shilpa's idea. She saw the poem that Ayana and I had written together, and we were hoping that she or someone that she knew could help us translate it. And my Hindi is not good enough to be able to do like a poetic translation in any way. And she actually said, I'm really enjoying singing in Punjabi. What do you think? There might be more of a softness to the lyrics compared to Hindi in the context of this melody that might fit very nicely. And she has a friend, Shirin Amandita, who is a poet and lyricist, and so she introduced us, and that's how the lyrics then got translated into Punjabi. So yeah.
And the video couldn't have been easy to film this, with the lockdown and situations like that. I imagine lots of use of mobile phones across what, three continents?
Yeah, it was not too difficult because I guess we're all doing stuff like this at the moment. So I'm just getting sort of slightly familiar with how many books I need on top of how many tables in order to get my phone at the right angle for my instrument and my face. So yeah, we all just basically filmed ourselves. And the only thing with stuff like that is, it can end up looking very disconnected. If we're all doing it separately on our own. So I just was in contact with everyone, just saying, look, let's just make sure we use daylight so the look is sort of similar. Let's maybe all try to have flowers in the shot so that there's a continuity through all of our stories. And, the rest is up to chance and luck, really.
And you had one of your regular collaborators edit this, isn't it? I mean, she works with you on various music videos.
So Nicola Cavalazzi is someone I've just met this year,
Oh,
but he did edit a video I released for my father's centenary on the 7th of April this year. I released a video on my dad's 100th birthday of myself and many of my father's disciples playing
disciples.
playing a new arrangement of his piece Sandhya Raga. And that was a tricky one to edit because it's a very fast piece and we're all playing together from multiple cities. There were so many of us. And he did an amazing job editing that together and making it look really visually interesting, but still authentic to what we were playing. So, yeah, I was really happy to get to work with him again. And I will definitely work with him again.
I'm very intrigued by the dancers. I mean, they're not all dressed up. They're really in workmanlike clothes, like they should be, because we're all home.
Yes,
And
exactly.
they're literally, it's almost as though they're dancing in their foyer or their backyard. Who are
They
these
went onto their
dancers?
rooftop, actually. Yeah, they
The
just went on.
rooftop
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
nice wooden boards. At least they got a
Yeah.
good footing. So,
Yeah.
where did you source them from? Are they friends of yours? Do you know them
So
or?
Guro, the woman, Guro Shia, is an old friend, and I've known her husband as long as I've known her. They're both incredible dancers. They run a dance company in Norway, and I met them many years ago. And Guro and I actually did a dance project together in about 2012. So we've been friends ever since. And just like with so many things with lockdown, it's very easy to kind of reach out to someone like she, for example, living in Norway and go, hey, we always talk about working together again, but I'm thinking of doing a video. Do you want to dance from there? And I just think they have a very tender softness to their style of dancing, and it's a very soft, delicate song to me. So I just thought it would be nice to have them be a part of it.
I like the fact that you're doing a lot of work with spoken word. His Holiness uh, released an album in July. It was called Inner World, and I just got it on my Apple Music, and it's quite delightful. Is it a Tibetan word? What is the song called? I noticed that His Holiness is reciting something, and then your sitar comes on.
I'm on the piece from Inner World called Amala, which means mother, and so it's a piece about compassion and how the mother or the primary caregiver can teach compassion to a baby right from their birth with the care and affection we give. So it's a very lovely concept, and it was a real honor to obviously play sitar alongside his voice. And yeah, I've been really interested in spoken word and music. There's a fine line, I think, between it being distracting or complementary. And I think that piece is one way that it works really well. Another one that I'm really proud of just having done is the collaboration with Patti Smith
Yeah.
and Soundwalk Collective. So they've released a video called Knowledge of the Self, which is part of their upcoming album. So you can hear the song already, and it's my sitar with her vocals. And yeah, it's really lovely to get to do that.
So how does it work? Do they send you the spoken word parts separately, or do you send them the music first, or is it the other way around? Just to understand the process when you do stuff like that.
Different collaborations work different ways. Both of those instances, they sent me a kind of rough atmospheric template to play over. And in the case of Patti Smith, they sent the words. With His Holiness, it ended up changing a little bit, the arrangements, but they had sent the words, so I knew what it was. And then like there's a final version of going back and forth and making sure everything is the way everyone's happy with.
And did you get an audience with His Holiness in the past, or of course
In the
now
past,
it's
I've had the fortune to. I met him first when I was a teenager with my dad, and then some years later, in my early 20s, I took part in a Tibet benefit concert in New York, which was organized by Richard Gere and Philip Glass. And His Holiness was there, and I had a really lovely audience with him at that point. He even held my hand for some time and sat with me, and we took a photo together. I mean, he was really, really kind and generous with his time.
But what is your practice? Are you a practicing Hindu or a Buddhist, or are you agnostic
I'm
as
a,
far as your
I'm
practice is concerned?
I'm practicing, but I wouldn't label myself. It's very much informed by the Hinduism I was raised with, but it's a bit looser than that. It definitely, I suppose, falls under the qualification of spiritual rather than religious. I pray and I meditate, but it's very open. It could be a tree or an inner spirit or a universal energy.
But you do make it a point that you're in touch with your Bong as well as your Tamil side. If there's Pongal, if there's Pongal or Durga Puja, and your mom or somebody's doing a puja. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, to an extent, and it's useful, of course, that New Year always happens to be the same for Bengalis and Tamilians. I don't know
yeah,
why.
it does.
Yeah.
That's a happy coincidence. And Patti Smith, she's such a legend, whether it's rock and roll or poetry and things like that. I pretty much grew up listening to her. Did
Oh,
you ever
I
go to a
love
Patti Smith gig?
I did, I
Yeah,
did. It was extraordinary. I saw her at a very tiny venue in London called the Purcell Room, which fits like 300 people. And I happened to be sat in the front row, so she was kind of 2 feet in front of me, just standing above me. And it was an intimate show that she did with her son and her daughter. And she was reading passages from her book, Just Kids, and then relating them to songs from those time periods. So she would talk, explain, sing a song, talk, explain, sing a song. And it was therefore very intimate, very vulnerable. You know, she would be speaking about her actual love and heartbreak and then singing the song. And I remember just being in that front row, weeping my face off. Like I was just so moved by her generosity of spirit as an artist. And yeah, it was extraordinary. And I don't know if you've read her book, Just Kids, but I think it's one of the best stories and descriptions of being an artist I've ever read.
that's interesting. That's a good enough read for me to pick up on. Thank you for the suggestion. And really, these are troubled times. I know that it should have been a happy occasion because it's your father's centenary. I mean, 100 years of the great man. And I'm sure you had lots of concerts lined up. I remember seeing something on Instagram about you and your sister coming together and maybe doing a few gigs. Obviously, none of that worked out. It must have been very, very disheartening. But the fact that you got, and you briefly mentioned this at the top, some of his key disciples, and I saw, for example, Pandit Vishwamohan Bhatt in there. Would you name a few of them who did this wonderful recreation of Panditji's composition?
Um, I basically reached out to some of the disciples who would have been in the live concerts we were planning. So we would have all been together that exact day performing together anyway. Pandit Vishwamohan Bhatt, Bikram Ghosh, um, Shubhendra Rao, Gaurav Mazumdar, so many artists. And I just wanted to mark the occasion in the absence of the live show we were going to do. It felt too strange to sort of leave it empty, knowing that we would have been on stage together that day. So being able to spend a few days making that video with them and editing it and then releasing it just gave me that similar feeling of being able to offer something. But yeah, and also Nora then released on the same day her version of my dad's song "I Am Missing You," which she would have performed live. So yeah, we just did our best to mark the occasion, in the absence of what we had planned. And as you say, it was sad not to get to do the things we had planned. But honestly, like those early days of lockdown and watching this pandemic spread across the world, for me at least, it was sad, but it was also okay because it felt so clear that that was the right thing to do. We all needed to be focusing on something different. And um, so yeah, it also felt like it was the right thing to do. And we hope that we can, redo some of the shows in the future.
And I'm really pleased that you're one of the few artists who are really going out on a limb to help frontline workers who are affected by the COVID-19 crisis. You were part of a music auction in the UK that involved you being alongside greats. Sting, of course, you've even collaborated with him. Annie Lennox and Taylor Swift and Emily Sandé and Paloma Faith. And this again was around about July time. Tell us about that particular auction and what you hope to achieve, and have they managed to do that?
They've managed to raise a great deal of funds, which is great, which will be going in particular to help women who have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic in various parts of the world. Basically, I've auctioned a music video, so the person who won is going to choose from a selection of my songs, and I'll make them a specially curated private video just for them. And that's what a lot of the artists are doing. Taylor Swift, for example, auctioned her guitar as well, but most people are doing things quite personal. I also had the chance to design a badge, a pin for an organization called Pin Your Thanks, which is raising all the proceeds and giving them to NHS charities to help here in the UK. So yeah, there's just loads of different ways, I guess, as an artist that you can kind of help amplify causes or direct, funds towards helpful situations. So I just try and do a little bit, really.
And I'm really thrilled that there's going to be a vinyl release.
Mm.
In a digital era, I'm a little old school. Sometimes you wish back,
Are
and
you a
it's
vinyl
wonderful. It's
guy?
wonderful. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. Wonderful that vinyl is coming back in a big way. Even in India, before the lockdown, you'd have record store days and people
Right.
meeting, exchanging vinyls, and that whole practice is coming back. I don't know how it is in the West. Was it
Very much
always
the
prevalent?
same. Yeah, it's really come back, and vinyl is really popular again. and doing really well. So it's really nice to get to release. Also because this is my first EP, Love Letters. I've always done albums.
Yeah.
So it felt a little weird not to have a sort of physical record of the piece of work I've made. And so the fact that EP can at least become vinyl, there's a physical manifestation for me to save and keep, which feels really good.
But I'm just curious to know from an artist perspective, I'm not a musician, so I'm not the right person to comment on this. Is the sound any different when you're streaming it off a streaming service or when you're playing it off analog? For example, when you're playing it
Well,
off vinyl?
yeah, I find a difference, but it obviously depends. I mean, you could have a vinyl and really crap speakers, and maybe that doesn't really do it. But when someone has a good system and it's vinyl with really lovely speakers, there's a warmth and I might be romanticizing it a little bit, but a sort of life to it that is sort of missing from the digital version, which is very, very clean, So there are some ways in which that's a good thing. The digital can be crystal clear and it can be clean and it can be sort of perfect. But there's a warmth to the vinyl, which is different.
Do you think CDs will ever make a comeback, or you
I
think
don't
that's pushing it?
know. I think CDs never sounded as good as vinyl in the first place, right?
Yeah,
They were just
you're
more
right.
convenient.
There's always that
So,
hiss with CDs.
yeah. And they just snap and scratch so
So,
quickly.
so do you have a release date for the vinyl? When is it?
Record Store Day, which is next Friday. It'll be the 20, oh God, it's now. It's
Yeah,
releasing on the 29th. Yeah.
29th.
29th of
So,
August.
yeah, right now, which means it will be ready to ship. I mean, I know that a lot of online stores have already started shipping.
That's right.
You can order out of online stores, so that's a good
Yeah.
cue to
So
anybody
if
who
there's any vinyl
watching this
people
listening.
in India, please do get it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
please go and do it. Also, you have another release in October. It's a compilation album. It's called Goodnight Stories for Rebel
Ah,
Girls.
you know about this. Yeah.
Would you
Yeah.
tell me about that, please?
So I don't know if you're familiar with them, but Goodnight Stories for Rebel Girls is an absolute phenomenon in
I
in
see.
children's literature. They started after my first son was born, so I'd say 7, 8 years ago, and they just sort of swept the world. It's a series of books where the first book is an anthology of short biographies of real life women, like real heroes from the past whose maybe stories have been forgotten or not quite known, but they're told in a storytelling way with illustrations. So it's basically introducing children to all these forgotten histories of incredible women from our times. And they're releasing a compilation of music to kind of complement this, which is Goodnight Songs for Rebel Girls. And they're getting several really well known female artists to cover other female artists and do songs in a gentle arrangement for evenings for kids. And as you know, I think I've always been a real fan of Bjork, and it's a bit random, but it felt like the opportunity to get to do something because they asked me to cover any female artist I know. And normally in my work, why would I get to cover Bjork, right? But I was like, oh, can I please, can I please cover Bjork? So I've done a rearrangement of her song Yoga, which is one of my favorites, and I've sang and played on it, which is very exciting.
Oh, lovely. We'll keep an ear out for that in October. And you're also on the musical score of feisty, lovely Mira's Suitable Boy.
Yes,
I love Mira Nair. How can
I
one not love Mira Nair?
Yeah, she's a phenomenon. I've co-scored that along with the incredible composer Alex Heffes. So she had asked me to score the series, but kind of coinciding with the centenary shows we were going to do, the timings were almost exact, and I wouldn't have been able to do both. So she suggested we co-score and introduced me to Alex Heffes, and that was a beautiful collaboration. He's a lovely composer, and it was great to still be able to be a part of writing the score for this without having to be fully responsible for the whole thing.
Yeah, I know when you're fully responsible for the whole thing that you're given a lot of these scenes and you've got to work on each scene. But in this instance, did you have to do that? Did you have to go through
Not so
something?
much. So
Not so
Alex had all of the kind of really awful heavy lifting, and then basically he would manage the technicalities, and then I had the lovely job of getting to be creative. So we had to do all of it through lockdown after one first initial meeting, and he would send me things from LA. He'd send me all the scenes, and sometimes he'd have an initial idea. He'd say, "What do you think? Can you add sitar to this?" Sometimes he'd go, "What do you think here? What raga would work? What mood?" And I'd then start the arrangements and send ideas. So it was very collaborative, but I definitely had the easier job.
I can't wait to see that and listen to you on the BGM, simply because I love the book and now it's running on BBC, but it is going to have an India release very soon on Netflix. So we look forward to that. Listen, there was another collaboration which was again dedicated to your father with Nitin Sawhney. It just had Nitin's fingers
Yeah.
playing piano
Yeah.
and you playing your sitar. Would you tell me about that, please?
So that's a song Fathers that we actually wrote back when he produced my album Traces of You.
Uh,
But he was also going to be a special guest at that centenary concert in London. So we decided to release a video of one of the songs we would have performed that night, which is why we played a new version of the song Fathers and released the video then.
Interesting. How are the kids? How are your boys adapting to the lockdown? Do they homeschool online? It can't be
We,
easy for them
oh
either.
my God, it was really quite the journey, wasn't it? I was homeschooling them with a mix of online digital hub from school, but very much at their age needing to be managed by the parent as well. So it was very, very intense. Fingers crossed they'll be going to school in a couple of weeks again physically, and we'll see how that goes and how that unfolds. But yeah, they're climbing up the walls. They're absolutely mental and feral and insane. But
No,
they're
yeah, I mean,
well,
if you keep them locked, it's just really unfair, isn't it, for
Yeah,
young
no,
kids when they should be out in the parks,
yeah,
just meeting
yeah,
other kids.
yeah. Well,
But
obviously the response to the pandemic has been a disaster here in the UK, but one of the blessings was that we were always allowed to step out once a day or and then later more. So at least with the kids we could always go out for that one big journey to the park and get out. So at least I can't imagine what it would be like in so many countries to not go outside at all. So we were quite blessed that way.
and do you have a trampoline set up in your back garden? I saw an Instagram video of you
That
jumping up it. Now I know
I
why you managed to say stay so fit.
I wish that was my garden. No, I was visiting a friend in the countryside here in the UK, so I was using their trampoline.
I have to talk about the fact that you put up this wonderful post. If I was in your place, I would have been seething mad. You were doing an interview with a newspaper or a magazine, and you were going live with them, and you were subjected to a lot of abuse. And you said very strongly in that post, and for people who are not on social media, I'd like you to talk about that here. It's really unfortunate that in the year 2020 women are still ridiculed, called names, asked to show body parts. So just your thoughts on that, please.
I mean, there's no quick answer on this one, but as you say, it's a tragedy how prevalent and widespread and normalized this kind of abuse is. It's a different gradient from the kinds of physical assault and abuse that can happen, but online abuse can be extremely harmful and traumatic as we've seen. And I think what happened to me on this particular live event was more low grade, but if you leave it at that and if you ignore it because it's lower, then you're actually condoning and allowing it, which then also opens up a normalization of worse abuse. So I really think at this point that we all need to be operating a bit more of a zero tolerance policy against that kind of abuse. And so I just wanted to speak on it, but I did it from a slightly different perspective of just, you know, talking to the people directly and just kind of going like, are you not capable of being better than this, and so I tried to come from a slightly compassionate point in this recent post of mine, which I don't always come from. Sometimes I'm feeling a bit more rage and a bit more impatience, but yeah, I think it's something that needs to be looked at multiple levels. So like the platforms that host these kind of events, for example, need to be really looking more at what they can do to help protect women who are kind of going out onto their platforms so that we minimize that happening. So yeah, it's kind of something that needs to be looked at
But
by
at a deeper level, what's the answer as a mother and as a woman? Is it education or is it parents to counsel their children better? I mean,
I think
and I have
it's
enough instances of
everything.
parents, yeah, enough instances of parents turning around and saying, "I didn't bring them up this way. Look how they turned out," and putting their hands
Right.
up.
The thing, it's the same as it's very parallel to the kind of racism conversations that are happening at the moment. It's not enough to just simply not teach people something. It's not just saying, don't do this, it's bad. It's also, how do you be good? And when the normalized systemic environment is not yet equal, if you don't actively work to correct it, you're actually propagating inequality. So you actually have to do more to help raise the bar with each person, So with my kids, for example, they're little boys, but I'm very conscious they're going to grow up to be men, you know? So from the time they've been really little, we've talked about consent in ways that are child appropriate. We talk about tickling, you know, and I say, I will never, ever, ever keep tickling you the second you say stop, because this is your body and you have the right to what happens to your body. And the same way, I want you to do the same for me. So yes, you can sit on my lap, but when I say no, please get up straight away, you know? And we talk, they don't even know about what abuse is yet, but we're preparing the ground with this idea of consent and respect
Wow.
and ownership of your own body. Do you know what I mean? And so it's like something I'm very conscious about, that I'm doing consciously and actively. And I think we require that in homes, from parents, from family members. We require that in schools. You know, there needs to be proper sex education and consent education and equality education within schools, so that there's no shame and secrecy and weirdness and confusion in those environments. Unless all of that's happening, how do things change?
Wow, you've just hit home with a very important thought. There are times, when we have two daughters, when I'd reach out to my elder daughter, and, I'd reach out to my elder daughter and I'd go, I want to hug you. And she'd say, no, dad, no, not
Yeah.
now. You know what I
Mm,
mean?
mm.
Uh, you get upset, but you're right. If they say don't do it, you're not going to do it.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
it's,
And it's like, what are we teaching them at home? So when you think of little
mm,
kids, you know, it's a very fine line. We have a very beautiful aspect to our culture of respecting elders, for example. But if what you teach kids is that they have to bow down and be silent and accept whatever elders say at all times, we're not really providing them the tools to be able to set their boundaries either, if they are in an inappropriate situation. So there's a lot of stuff like that that needs to be constantly examined, constantly looked at. It takes active work.
okay, my time's up. What's a skill that you worked on in lockdown? Something that you
I can now engineer myself.
ah, well done.
Seriously.
Listen, you're wonderful, and conversations with you are always vibrant and so insightful. Take care of yourself,
Thank you
and
very much.
much love. Be safe and healthy.
Take
Cheers.
care. Bye.